All right, so joining us for our interview today, we have Professor Patrick Vernon, who is now Sir Patrick Vernon, having been knighted for his contribution to work in the areas of racial equality and social justice. And he is also the UK South representative for Global Jamaica Diaspora Council, and he's here in Jamaica actually attend the Global Diaspora Conference. Thank you so much for joining us, Sir Patrick. Great to have you.
No problem at all. It's always good to be home.
All right, so you're used to that designation yet, Sir Patrick? Or that sound?
Well, it's still. It was announced. it went live in the UK a few hours ago,
Wow.
and I've had lots of messages from people. It feels a bit surreal because it's probably maybe when I actually go to the palace and pick it up, the gong, then maybe it'll hit me then. But yeah, but it's good to be recognised for the work I've done for many years.
Now, your parents were actually members of the Windrush generation, so they that big migration were part of that big migration to Britain in the 1950s. Reading here, your father's
Absolutely.
family is from Hanover, your mother's family is from St. James. So you could have gone either way. I mean, you didn't necessarily have to immerse yourself in Jamaican affairs in the way you have. Why have you?
Well, it's just that's how history works. It's great to have done the work in the UK, but obviously I've always maintained my connections with Jamaica. Like I've got lots of family here in St James, in Orange, particularly Orange, Sutherlands, because I'm related to the Shirleys there, and also Hanover as well. So and the funny thing about it, I grew up in Wolverhampton, and the majority of the Jamaicans in Wolverhampton are from Hanover and St James. So you have this umbilical cord between Jamaica and the UK. It's a very strong cord, and that's one of the reasons why I'm involved in the Global Diaspora Council to develop that relationship with the diaspora in the UK and with Jamaica, because obviously Jamaica's going through a difficult time post hurricane, but it's also about how we can work together to build the best Jamaica for everyone.
You speak of how growing up, your events of your childhood helped to shape this emphasis and this importance that racial equality work and social justice work has for you. Share with us, if you could, some of those formative experiences.
Yeah, sure. So I've been involved in lots of campaigns. I've worked in senior management in public services. I've been a civil servant. I've worked as a senior director for the NHS. But outside those senior roles, I've always campaigned for inequalities affecting particularly the Caribbean and the wider black community in the UK, particularly around mental health. I campaigned for many years for a Windrush Day, which was accepted by the government some years ago. And also I was involved in the whole issue of the scandal, the Home Office Windrush Scandal, where lots of people from the Caribbean who were British, but they were denied their citizenship by the government. So I've been involved in that. I've been involved in doing stuff around black history and culture as well. I've developed a good working relationship over the years with Ian Randall Publishers. We've published a number of books together, publications around Jamaican and Caribbean history as well. So I've done lots of things around history, racial justice, equality, and also preserving our history as well.
What do you remember from growing up that looking back, you can say, something that was one of the things, or that series of events helped to set me on this particular path, helped to pique my interest in these areas?
Well, when I was a student, went to university, I studied law, so I was involved in a number of sort of campaigns around people being threatened with deportation. But I think the campaign that really hit me, really shaped me, was in Wolverhampton itself. When I got back from law school, and there was a young man called Clinton McKerbin. He's also of Jamaican heritage. He was killed by the police in 1987, and so I was involved working with the family and with others trying to get justice for the family. But the sad thing about it, it's nearly 40 years since his death, and next year we're hoping to do a blue plaque to recognise his loss. But also, the family wants to reopen the case again. So I think that case was influenced me because what happened that day, he went into a clothes shop to buy some item of clothing. The police automatically assumed he had a stolen credit card. Without asking any questions, they arrested him, forced him down to the ground, and he basically choked to death. And that could have been me. I could have walked in that shop that day. I could have been arrested without not given the opportunity to explain anything. So I think that particular injustice shaped all the work I've done, to be quite honest.
Wow. Did that influence your going on to study law? Or had you started your studies by then?
I don't, no, I'd already studied law already. I mean, when I got involved in that campaign, I'd already done my degree in law. I actually did the master's in law, and I was at that time trained to be a solicitor. So, but what I suppose after that murder, I decided it was more about not just the law itself, but the wider issues around campaigning, around advocating for our rights. Like Bob Marley said, get up, stand up for your rights. It was that kind of mantra, but I suppose that influenced all the work I've been doing for the last couple of decades.
What was the environment in your community growing up for people of colour?
Well, definitely. Well, a lot of Jamaicans, when they came over to Britain in the 50s, like my parents did, they faced overt discrimination. There were clear. There was signs in when people were looking for accommodation. There were signs saying no dogs, no blacks, no Irish. It was a deliberate policy. And people didn't. When people did get jobs, they weren't paying the going rate. They were paid less than the going rate because they were black. So there was lots of discrimination that happened in housing, in employment, even socializing. That led, that's one of the key things around the history of Jamaica and the system of sound system culture was when people couldn't go to dances, mainstream parties, people had the blues parties at their homes, and that helped to promote reggae in the UK in many ways and the sound system culture because we had to create our own alternative venues for music and for entertainment. So that was part of that discrimination. And then even though I was born in Britain, we still face discrimination. And like the first generation born, we still face similar discrimination. So, things. I mean, it was down to the Windrush generation. They played a key role in campaigning for better race equality legislation in the 60s. You had 1965, 1968 Race Relations Act, which stopped some aspects of discrimination. That was because of our lived experiences of facing discrimination, and we were able to lobby, influence Parliament, and the public as well.
What's a personal experience you've had with discrimination?
Well, it's everyday living in Britain, discrimination. I mean, it's discrimination because the reality is, I see it as one of the legacies of enslavement. That no matter how clever you are, how many qualifications you have, you're still not given that kind of respect that you deserve. Which my parents always said you've got to work twice as hard, three times as hard, and if you've worked 2 or 3 times as hard, they still don't give you that level of respect. So that discrimination. Only I've had experience at school, university, working, but you have to be positive. You have to keep fighting. You have to keep pushing, and you have to motivate others to be the best they can be, despite those challenges.
And does it feel different when you come back to Jamaica? I say come back, even though I know you weren't born here.
I mean, obviously, I was born in the UK, but I've always had a very close connection with Jamaica. Yeah, like I said, I use the expression "it's at home" when I go and visit my family, particularly my mother's side of the family in Sign, Orange, over River. I have that connection there. I've done a lot of research work tracing the family history on my mother's side, so I've traced it, all the way to. I even found a plantation. Where my grandfather was based in Westmoreland in St. Petersfield. I actually went there some years ago, and it's still a working plantation around sugarcane. and then and then like finding the family land, original family land. Obviously, we all have different types of family land, but I found the original family land, which is in Sutherland, up in the hills, in St James as well. So I have that kind of historical connection, but also a connection with, I've got family here, cousins. I had a sister here living in Jamaica, but she passed away some years ago. I've got a cousin, another sister in America, but and then also just being part of the wider Jamaican diaspora community is important. And in the UK context,
I'm so sorry.
we're
Can I ask you
small.
to hold on for one moment? I just have to take the break, do a little bit of business. Listeners, this is Beyond the Headlines. We're talking here with Sir Patrick Vernon. He is newly knighted. He's part of the diaspora community, and he has been awarded, perhaps I should say, for his work in social justice and fighting racial inequality. We're back in a moment. Remember our WhatsApp line, 553-5908. Soon come. Okay, no, apparently we are going on. So let me just pick up there, because at the same time, Sir Patrick, the issue of, you mentioned a little earlier the work you've done in relation to Windrush, campaigning for a day to recognize the Windrush generation, fighting against the indignities and inequalities that came out of the Windrush Scandal. And we were speaking earlier about the fact that your own parents were part of the Windrush generation. What in growing up brought home to you the significance of that period in our history?
It's a significant part of the history because, when the Windrush ship left Jamaica 25th of May 1948 with about 1,000 passengers, not just from Jamaica but other parts of the Caribbean, South America as well. Britain needed our labour after the Second World War, so they needed our labour to work in health, transport, construction, you name it, and a lot of the brightest and the youngest people left Jamaica, other parts of the Caribbean. We were told streets were paved with gold. There's opportunity. You could have a 5-year plan, 10-year plan. You could come back home. But when people came to Britain, they found out the realities of discrimination, and then eventually they had families, and then people stayed and said, "Well, how can we make the best of raising our children in Britain?" And that's what happened. So now we've got, about 4 generations of Jamaicans in Britain as well. So that when it came to the scandal itself, there've been so many changes in policy. I mean, when Jamaica got its independence in 1962. That was a quite important moment for Jamaican as a country, but also it had implications for those Jamaicans that were living in Britain as well, because then later on, when the government introduced draconian immigration policy, it meant that it just reduced the rights of people that were British in the first place. Because remember, before independence, if you travel, Britain had its empire, wherever you were in the world, you could get a British passport automatically without any problems because of Britain's empire. That all changed with independence, and that all changed with immigration policy. And then this led to in 2015 what we now know. When the government introduced a policy called hostile environment policy, where you had to have documentary evidence to prove how long you've been in Britain, and this affected those people from the Windrush generation that came to Britain as children, particularly those who came as children, because they used their parents' or aunts or uncles' passports, and for many people, not everyone gets passports or even travel. So they were affected by that because they couldn't prove they were British, and so I realised when I was involved in my campaigning work that this felt like a class action targeting Caribbean and particularly a lot of Jamaicans. And I did a petition, which over 200,000 people signed within the week. There was a debate in Parliament, and at the same time, CARICOM were having their meeting in. So the Commonwealth states, heads of the Commonwealth states, were having their meeting in London during that time, and Theresa May, who was the Prime Minister at the time, refused to meet Andrew Andrew Holness and all the other Caribbean leaders have a conversation about this issue around the Windrush generation, and that got further exposed. And eventually, she apologised because one of the ministers lied in Parliament as well, and that led to some changes, but still significant more work needs to be done around the compensation and for justice for Windrush as well.
How did you feel personally connected to that campaign growing up as a children of Windrush immigrants? I mean, did you used to hear stories about the journey or what led to the journey or those early days?
My parents told me their journey. They met in Jamaica. My dad came first. Sent for my mom. They got married, and then they raised myself, my siblings. So that so that's the kind of the story that with lots of people that came from Jamaica and other parts of the Caribbean came to Britain in the 50s, 60s. By the time you reach the 70s, early 70s, because of the nature of immigration law and policy, that restrict the flow of number of people coming from the Caribbean as well. So that's had an impact. But growing up, I mean, I always had an interest in the history of Jamaica. I remember when I did my master's many years ago, I did that at Warwick University, and it was at the same time when they established the first Caribbean Studies Department in the UK. And I remember.
I'm so sorry, I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that. First Caribbean, what department?
Well, one of the very first Caribbean departments at the university.
Okay.
This was Warwick University back in the 80s, and I was doing my master's law degree at the time. So I got to know people in the Caribbean Studies department. So my main thesis I decided to do for my master's was I looked at the history of gun legislation in Jamaica from slavery right up to the gun courts of the 70s. So that was interesting just to learn that history of firearm legislation, history, the politics around the various states of emergency that took place in the 60s, 70s and 80s, etc. So I've always had an interest in Jamaican history and politics as well. I mean, eventually I became a politician in London. I was a councillor in Hackney for about 8 years. So I've always had that affinity and connection.
In relation to the problems that emerged that came public out of the Windrush Scandal, have those issues now been properly dealt with and resolved and put to bed, or are there still lingering injustices?
There's still lingering injustices for a whole variety of factors and reasons. So firstly, when firstly around people's status, the government created a task force to fast track people's status. A number of people have got passports and are able to travel again, which is good. The funny thing about the task force scheme, at the same time when Britain was leaving Europe as part of Brexit, there's been more Europeans applying for Windrush status than Caribbean people, which is a contradiction in itself. So there's something. The second thing is about the compensation scheme. Compensation scheme was launched in 2019 by the government, but it's been very slow in paying out to people. They're not even given proper levels of compensation, and not even given proper support around legal assistance. So that is a still ongoing issue, and a number of people lost their homes. Because at the time if you couldn't prove you were British and you were working, you lost your jobs. People lost their homes because they couldn't pay the rent or the mortgage, as well. And I chaired an event in Parliament just before I came to Jamaica 2 days ago, looking at the whole impact of housing and the scandal, because a lot of people, I said, lost their properties because of the scandal, and then it's had an impact on people's mental health and well-being. The ultimate sanction for any country in the world can do is to take away people's status and citizenship, and you almost like become stateless. So if you've been living in Britain for about 40, 50 years, you've been working, you've raised your family, then you're told one day you're not British, we're going to deport you, that has an impact on people's identity, on their mental health, and that has had major ramifications, not just for those being directly affected by the scandal, but it had an impact on their children and even their grandchildren as well. So there's still ongoing issues that needs to be resolved around the justice side of things, like the compensation scheme needs to be improved, it needs to be done independently. So we're still campaigning along the compensation scheme and for that recognition as well. But also, I've been involved in campaigning for recognising the history of Windrush, the contribution to Britain as well, and that's quite important to recognise that we also have built Britain in terms of particularly if you look at healthcare, the NHS, the nurses and emerging doctors playing a key role as well. And one of the things that's happened for Jamaica and other parts of the Caribbean, you have a brain drain. People leave the Caribbean and Jamaica to go to the UK or America or Canada. And one of the key challenges, because I've worked in healthcare for many years, and this is going to be one of the items that's going to be discussed at the Diaspora Conference this week in Montego Bay, is how can we bring back talent? How can we nurture the talent? How can we get returnees, or how can we build a talent locally in Jamaica to make sure that we can provide high quality healthcare education system as well?
I'm glad you mentioned the conference, because I'd wanted to ask you about that before I had to let you go, in fact. So what else are you looking forward to there in terms of issues, in terms of the various areas of focus?
So I'm part of the Global Jamaica Diaspora Council. The council was established over 8 years ago by the government, and the whole focus of the council is to get representatives from different parts of the world, where there are Jamaicans, to work with the Jamaican government around its 2030 strategy to basically support the economic, social development of the country, tapping into our connections, our talents, our skills, resources, but also for those people, first, second, third, fourth generation, who live in the UK, America, Canada, or anywhere in the world that want to come back to Jamaica, how they can facilitate people coming back to Jamaica to add value to the country. So one of the key things that the conference is looking at is the focus on resilience. That's the main theme of the conference, post Melissa. But and not just simply just post Melissa, it's more about post global economy. If you look at what's happening around the world, around AI, technology, movement of labour, money and resources, how does Jamaica build itself up to be competitive and also diversifies its kind of commercial base. Obviously, tourism is an important part, as we all know, but we actually look at other aspects as well of economy, and also about looking at education, looking at agriculture, looking at young people. How can we build young people to be future leaders as well, and also looking at all the kind of fantastic good deeds, volunteer work, missions and projects, and people who've raised money on behalf of Jamaica in Jamaica's hour of need during the time of the hurricane. And we also know that if you look at projections, there might be future major hurricanes that might come across the Caribbean. So how do we prepare for that resilience for future hurricanes, and and the role of the diaspora in supporting Jamaica as well?
All right, going to leave it there. But thank you so much. We appreciate you talking to us, and congratulations once again.
No problem at all. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, talking there with Sir Patrick, newly knighted Sir Patrick